Jewish Education in Media is pleased to present L'Chaim, a program that highlights the people, issues, and events of importance to the Jewish community. Now here is your host, Rabbi Mark Golub.
I'm Mark Golub, and the foundation of Jewish community is not the professional leadership alone. What truly energizes Jewish life, makes Jewish life vibrant and creative, it's the lay leaders of the Jewish community whose involvement and commitment, their time, their energy, their wisdom, and passion for all things Jewish. They, the lay leaders, are the engine of Jewish life today. Without them, there would be nothing for the professional leadership to do. And lay leader does not necessarily mean one has a title. Lay leaders are often the unsung chorus of Jewish women and men engaged in the day-to-day work that sustains Jewish life and Jewish community. So kol hakavod to all the lay leaders in the Jewish community throughout America, in synagogue life, in Jewish organizational life. You are making Jewish life possible. And I'm so pleased to say that on this edition of L'Chaim, I have the enormous kick of introducing you to a woman who's devoted so much of her adult life to the Jewish community. She is not a household name, but she's making an enormous contribution to Jewish life today. Harriet Schleifer, who's chair of the Board of Governors of the American Jewish Committee. Harriet Schleifer is an attorney who focused on education law. Harriet also is development co-chair of the Jewish Religious Equality Coalition, and in Westchester, where she and her husband Leonard live, Harriet is a member of the executive committee of the AJC Westchester Lower Fairfield Regional Office, which is also served as president. And every year, JBS is honored to present exclusive television coverage of the AJC's annual Global Forum. In 2018, the AJC Global Forum was in Jerusalem for the first time, and Harriet Schleifer hosted a session which you may have seen here on JBS dealing with Jewish pluralism in Israel and the increasing power of the Orthodox rabbinate. It is wonderful to have you at this table. I have followed your work, and I am thrilled by it, and I'm thrilled that you're here on JBS and L'Chaim. Thank you, sweetheart.
Thank you, and it's good to be here. I'm excited.
Good. By the way, what was it like for you? You've been in all the AJC Global Forums, but this is the first time the AJC held their forum in Jerusalem. It was the 70th anniversary of Israel's birth. What was it like?
Well, it was exhilarating.
In what way?
Well, this was the first time that AJC held a global forum outside of the United States, and it was the first time, obviously, in Jerusalem, being, our site of choice to commemorate the 70 years,
Yes.
which was a time of great happiness. We were there, not long after the opening of the embassy, the American embassy in Jerusalem, and we came with 2,450 people from all over the world, representing 56 countries. So it was wonderful to be able to show the breadth and depth of what AJC does and the global reach that AJC has. And many of our people were first-timers.
Yes.
We had 400 college students. We had intergenerational families.
Mm-hmm.
So it was quite a time of excitement, but a sense of your extended family.
Yes.
And that's what made it special.
It seemed to me, as I watched, that it was a celebration. That it was very exciting. I was so sorry I could not be there, but I was thrilled that we could bring it to our audience through JBS. Anyway, mazal tov on it.
Well, thank you very much.
I want to talk about some of the issues that were addressed by the Global Forum, but first I want to talk for one moment about you. because as you heard in the open, I'm impressed by those in the Jewish community who give of themselves because they love it and because they're committed to Jewish life. Where does this come in you? And I want you to take me back to your family growing up. Who were your mother and father? Where were you raised? And what kind of Jewish home did they have for you?
My parents were Holocaust survivors.
Named?
Reuben and Frances Partel from Częstochowa, Poland. But Partel was anglicized. It was Pantofel, which means slipper in Polish. So my father's parents had a background in making the uppers of the shoes, which was a higher trade than just making the soles. So there was some pride to that.
Okay, but you're second generation.
But I'm my parents were first generation American, and we grew up in a very traditionally cultural Jewish home. My mother came from a very religious home, but the loss, because of the Shoah of 5 brothers and a mother, left her a little bitter about practice. But we had Shabbat dinner and we had the same menu every Friday night as long as she was alive. I mean, we had the chicken feet in the soup and we had flanken in the soup and boiled carp. I mean, we were really a traditionally cultural Jewish home. And my father davened every morning and every evening. And although we didn't belong to a synagogue, religion was his identity. He didn't know how to be other than a Jew. When asked the question, "Aren't you mad at God?" And my dad's answer was, "I don't know how else to be other than a Jew. I am a Jew through and through." So I grew up with pride, tremendous pride of being Jewish. And it's part of my DNA, it's part of my nature, but it's part of my nurture, because the home environment really let the Jewish kishkas flourish.
I was confused about one thing I want you to clarify for me. Did you say your parents were Holocaust survivors?
Correct.
But then you said that they were first generation Americans.
Well, they're how we're defining it, they were the first generation to move to this country after the war. So I'm a first generation.
You're a first generation American, you're a
Yes.
second generation survivor.
Correct.
Okay. Siblings?
I have a sister, 22 months younger. We're very close, and that's part of the Holocaust experience.
Explain that to me.
My father was the sole survivor of his family. He lost everybody in his immediate family. My mother lost the 5 brothers and a mother, and survived with one brother that she never was out of sight or out of touch with him. They were attached at the hip, my uncle. And
where did he live?
we all my parents moved to the Bronx, and I was born in the Bronx, and then they made it to a little postage house stamp in Rego Park, Queens.
And your uncle was?
My uncle still remained in the Bronx.
What was his name?
His name was Morris Wallman, and he lost a child and a wife in the Holocaust, and was introduced to his second wife, and who then had 2 children, my first cousins, through my parents at night school. My parents came to this country, and they immediately went to night school and learned United Nations on the march with flags unfurled. I mean, they were very proud to come to their new country, very grateful, very grateful. But my parents, having lost everybody, taught my sister and me, your Schwester is your Schwester is your Schwester is your Schwester is your Schwester, and nobody comes between you and your Schwester. So family and Jewish continuity are just indelibly part of my makeup.
Harriet, sometimes the second generation, children of Holocaust survivors, have a hard time. Did you have a hard time because of your parents' experiences?
I can't say I had a hard time, but my husband will tell me that, he thinks I had a hard time. it made me very protective. Made me very protective of my parents and my sister. So you could never, ever contemplate disappointing or hurting your parents. That would be crushing. You could, never hang out with the wrong people. And you didn't want to. And my father, if he just gave me a look, the few times in my life that he gave me a look of disappointment, was more heartbreaking to me than if he had, physically put a hand. I mean, I just couldn't bear that idea. Mm-hmm. So I was always very, very protective as well of my younger sister. And I think that in general, I don't take anything for granted. I don't want what doesn't belong to me. I have a very strong sense of justice and what's right and how to treat other people. And again, I don't know whether that's totally nurture. Some may be inherited as a personality trait, but I really have a healthy respect for people of all stripes and being kind.
You made it sound like, however, your mother had a harder time adjusting than your father. It sounded like your mother, you were saying, I think you used the word bitter.
I think she was bitter about why God let this happen, so that she wasn't so interested in formal religious expression.
Okay.
Let's put it that way.
Okay. In general, if I met her, what was her tone? Did she have a hardness to her? Would I have described her as a happy person?
They both loved life and they both appreciated life. But she had less patience. I think she just had less patience than my father did. Now, again, is that a personality trait that gets exacerbated because of your experiences? My mother had a husband that perished in the Holocaust, but she always knew my father, and then they married. So, who knows?
Okay, sometimes survivors don't want to talk. They don't even want to talk to their children. To what extent did your parents share with you what they went through?
I think as soon as I could make eye contact with my mother as an infant, where I could look at her, I heard stories. I knew everybody among them. They only had other survivor friends. They did not have friendships outside of that experiential circle. And so I always knew, well, that one used to be married to that one's brother, and this one had a baby who got hit, found under a cellar and was killed. And so I had all the down and dirty. In fact, I remember, I don't know where my parents got it, but I had pictures of skeletons like perched atop of mass graves. And I think I was 3 years old, and I took it downstairs to to the kids in the street from my apartment building, and was showing it to everybody because I thought that was normal. That wasn't strange to me. God knows what the other kids thought I was showing them. So am I damaged? Am I not damaged?
You're not damaged. Your father sounds like he was a sweetheart.
Terrible sweetheart.
Terrible sweetheart.
Terrible sweetheart.
That's lovely. What do you do for a living?
When he came, he was a welder trained in Poland. He was 20 when the war broke out, so he didn't really have much of a formal education, but he was a welder. Then he worked in a munitions factory. That was slave labor, so he learned bullets. And then he came to this country and worked in a dress factory. He sewed his first dress like this. And the guy wanted to fire him because he didn't know how to sew dresses, but he did one like this. And the guy said, I thought you said you could make dresses. And he said, show me once, and I will make the perfect dress. And then he was the most productive person. And then he had a slipcover business, and he made slipcovers, and he schlepped drapes across the Bronx over his shoulder. And then he had a factory, a quilting and batting factory.
Well, good for him.
He had, there was a lot of physical labor.
Yes.
But he did what he needed to do to have a comfortable family, and we never lacked. We never lacked for anything. ballet lessons, piano lessons, sleepaway camp, you know, the right things.
Were either of your parents actually in camps?
They were in slave labor camps in
Slave-
Hasag.
Okay.
Hasag in Chenstochova.
Do you ever say to yourself, how did people survive? And I'm not talking about physically, emotionally. And how do they then move from losing people they loved so dearly, and they're all gone, and then they have to continue living life? You must have thought of that. What's your answer? How do people do this?
Well, I think that they have to compartmentalize what they're dealing with at the moment with the hope that things will be different, and just bluntly go through the motions. My mother said to me once, life can be so beautiful. And I was taken aback by the fact that she could say that. Having lost her family, a husband, life can be so beautiful. And my father had such compassion when he saw deer in the winter. He got so upset. Harriet, what are they going to eat in the winter? And they're going to be so cold. Like, how are they going to live in Chappaqua, New York in the winter? And he survived concentration camp. And he was worried about the deer in Chappaqua. So, you know, you go through the motions, but somehow there has to be a strength, because they were pretty they were well-adjusted people coming out of this. They were still well-adjusted.
It seems, by the way, and I don't mean this gratuitously, you seem adjusted. How's your sister?
Terrific.
Okay, so somehow your parents were able to raise two healthy, lovely daughters. Well, good for them, you know?
She was an OB/GYN. She brought life into this. My sister.
I
My
get
sister
chills.
brought life into this world. So, I mean, you're always looking, you know, to create and sustain.
You said she has a family of her own.
She does.
So how many children does she have?
She has 2 children. She has a daughter who's a veterinarian,
Yes,
a fabulous veterinarian, Francis Kaminsky,
yes.
and a son, Philip Kaminsky, who's a very successful lawyer.
Okay, and you have how many children?
I have 2 boys. My older son, who's getting married,
Mazal tov.
thank you very much, is an assistant U.S. attorney in Los Angeles.
Very impressive. And
Smart boy. And then I have a younger son who's 32 to be, who is developmentally disabled.
I understand. So you're not only a mother, you're an aunt.
Mother.
And how do they get along? Your children and your sister's children. Is there any contact between cousins for them?
Very much so, because we were raised as Schwesters.
Yes.
And we're the 4 of us are always together, and our children grew up together. So we have a very close extended family.
That is so lovely.
Very close.
What about your husband? What was his background, and to what extent does he fit in? To what extent was it an adjustment?
Well, he's a wannabe greener. I mean, we tease him about that. He wants to be, you know, a Polish son of survivors, but he's not. His parents were born in this country they were born in Brooklyn. Both parents were born, actually, his mother was born in the Midwest, but raised in Brooklyn. His father was born in Williamsburg, Yiddish-speaking home. His father went to Cornell in 1929 on a Latin and Greek scholarship.
Wow.
His mother was a really traditional homemaker and very, very in love with her husband. They had a very nice, my husband and his brother had a very nice upbringing in Rego Park, Queens.
Lovely.
And
What is his Jewish involvement? Does he have the same commitment to the Jewish thing, the Jewish people, the state of Israel, that you do?
he has the same commitment. He doesn't spend as much time in that world as I do.
Mm-hmm.
But he has it in his heart, and he supports everything I do.
That's lovely.
Which, by definition,
Absolutely
It makes
right.
him totally committed.
Absolutely. So how were your parents, how did they feel about Israel, your parents?
Oh, Israel was their baby. Israel, I mean, in our home, you know, there was talk about Israel and worry about Israel, and then pride for Israel in '67, and they went through, you know, fearing that Israel would not be able to live a long and prosperous life because Israel was so new. I mean, my parents had just come to this country right before Israel was declared independent, so they watched and they watched. They hoped and dreamed that Israel would become a robust, healthy country, which she has become. So Israel was very much part of our home
Okay,
life.
so that also is the context in which you grew up.
Very much so.
When was the first time you went to Israel?
1972.
In what context?
I worked on a kibbutz for 9 weeks.
How did that happen?
I needed to do something in that summer, and my mother said, I'm sending you to Israel. And I signed up with my sister. I think it was through ZOA, and we were placed on Kibbutz Kinneret, which I understand now there was a rocket fire from Syria that fell in Lake Kinneret, which I swam in every day when I was finished picking grapes.
Roughly how old were you then?
19.
19 years old. Did your sister go with you?
Yes, she did.
So the sisters were together at this kibbutz Kinneret.
Kinneret. And we lived in a bomb shelter. Our room was a bomb shelter.
I don't even imagine, you know, I wasn't there, I can't see it, but I imagine it was fabulous.
Oh.
A fabulous 6 weeks, 7 weeks?
9.
9 weeks. Oh, isn't that wonderful?
It was the best summer I ever had, and what opened my eyes is that I knew why I was there. I was there because I was Jewish, and Israel was the Jewish homeland, and the kibbutz, I mean, Israel, you know, the beginning of Israel with the settlers and, you know, kibbutz life. I mean, it was just such a dream for me. When I got there, there were Dutch, British, people from other nationalities who were backpacking and traveling, and as long as they worked on the kibbutz, they got room and board. So they had a hiatus in their travels by living on the kibbutz, and that was the first time I ever really understood that Israel was also meaningful and a haven to the other religions, because I had just grown up with Israel as my Jewish country. So it was very eye-opening.
Amazing. Now, you've been to Israel many, many times in the course of your life now. How would you describe your feeling as an adult, as opposed to when you were a 19-year-old teenager still? But as you look at Israel now and all the times you've been there, what moves you about Israel today? And we may talk later about whatever the issues are in Israel. I'm not talking about it from that perspective. I'm asking for an emotional reaction for you. You get off a plane in Israel, time after time after time. What is it that you feel, and is there any moment or two that you feel stays with you forever?
I love getting out at Ben Gurion Airport and going up the ramp to leave the airport. That feels like home. When I leave the airport, I feel like I've arrived back home, another home where I feel extraordinarily comfortable. I have relatives who live in Israel, so I'm always spending some time with them. But when I look around, I just think of all the blood and sweat that went into creating and sustaining this, and how lucky I am. How lucky I am to have Israel protecting me, and how lucky I am maybe to help make some more positive changes along the journey.
Mm-hmm. What decade did you go to high school?
I graduated in 1970.
Okay. When you were growing up, and then you go to college where?
Cornell.
Cornell. If I had known you, would I have said to you, would I have experienced you as a typical American Jewish liberal kid? Would you self-define yourself as a liberal-leaning Jew, especially as you were growing up?
I think I was a little bit more traditional than liberal, but I was also more of a goody two-shoes. I always liked to sit in the front of the class or lecture hall, and
I was right next to you.
So
I love goody two-shoes.
So-
But you know, there's some people who don't like goody. I don't get it. Good for you.
And I like to go home. I mean, the idea of going home for Thanksgiving back to my parents in Queens, I looked
Absolutely.
forward to it. And the other kid, I have to say, like, you don't want to generalize, but some of the other maybe more progressive kids at that time were complaining, oh, I have to go home to my parents. And that was very alien to me. So I don't know. I mean, I wasn't.
All right, I'm going to ask the question a different way. You have a passion for justice. That is a traditional Jewish value. It's normally associated with a liberal thinking individual, which is slightly simplistic and not fair. There are people in the entire spectrum of the Jewish community who care passionately about justice. But I'm asking you, as you look at the way you've lived your life, what concerns you and what has concerned you, how would you self-define in the using justice as the criterion for what drives your concerns? Where are you?
Well, I'm progressive in the sense that I think everybody needs an equal chance to experience success. And when I practiced law, it was very, very close to my heart that I represent, and I had many minority clients. And it was very important to me that I fight for the educational benefits that they're guaranteed under the law, and not let a school district fall down on their responsibility. But having said that, I also understood that school districts aren't bad people or bad places. So it's a question of making sure that everybody got a fair and square chance, and educating those in the school administration who either weren't aware that they had those responsibilities, or find a way to educate them because they didn't understand a lot of the issues, and students, they didn't understand a lot of what made the students experience failure. They just didn't understand it. So my job, very seriously, was to uncover and diagnose where the deficits lie that prevented school success, either behaviorally or academically. And I always felt that kids don't wake up in the morning trying to figure out how to hurt themselves in the process, that there's a reason behind a lack of success. And my job was to diagnose that and bring that information to the school districts and work in partnership. That's the other thing. I'm a partner. I like to partner with people. I think, that's the only way to really affect change. So if we could partner in terms of helping that student, that gave me the greatest satisfaction, the greatest satisfaction. So justice to me is also allowing people to have the equal opportunity in society, however that looks, and to treat people like people, because basically people are good and we all want the same thing. So I try and live my life respecting others and trying to think about where they're coming from. Because you and I both know that there are three sides to every story. It's your perception, your experience, it's my perception, and then there's something in the middle that really is the objective reality that we're dealing with. And we have to both understand how we're coming to any table, any discussion.
Harriet, people are basically good. Yes?
Yes.
In my mind, that is the hallmark of Jewish faith, even more than God, because it is easy to look at history and humanity and argue people are not good. And the Jewish tradition is adamant that people are good and that good people can create anything. And the trick in life is to find other good people to be around. Isn't that true?
Absolutely.
So as you look at Israel, when we see in the Jewish community today, a portion of the American Jewish community is very critical of the state of Israel. How do you view that?
So I personally lament that our generation did not provide as much both formal and experiential education to our children in terms of what is Yiddishkeit, what is Judaism, what makes a Jew. Is it cultural? Is it geographic? Is it historical? Is it your DNA? We haven't really made that a priority enough so that the next generation is educated on this. And I'm not talking about level of observance or being able to, learn Torah or Haftorah, which is not bad either. But we haven't really discharged, I think, our responsibilities.
Why? Why did what you describe happen?
Well, part of that is the success of the American Jew in this country. We're accepted like no other country. We're living in wonderful times. We're professionals. We're in politics. We're in every field in society at every economic level. And the comfort could be that we don't feel that we're having the mentality of defining ourselves only as Jews. We're defining ourselves more universalistically. So we've fallen down a little bit on the particularistic aspects of our identity. Maybe we were too busy getting ahead to become deans of schools or presidents of, organizations. And so, formal Jewish education, sending your kids to Israel. Now Birthright, of course, is trying to make up for that and doing a...
But there's still a very small percentage of American Jews ever visit Israel, both as adults or with their children.
That hurts me.
But it's true.
It's true and it hurts me. So I don't think we focused enough on our Jewish identities. And so... today, I grew up with Israel, and I made a very big point of passing that down to my son.
How? And by the way, I asked that question very seriously. I want to know from somebody who is as passionate, as committed as you are, what did you try to do, which obviously you would love it to be, and you don't want everybody to be like you, but you would be a model. There's a model here that you feel somehow didn't take in this generation. What did you do that you feel was successful?
Well, I joined a synagogue. I had almost every leadership role in the synagogue. I became president of my synagogue. I go to shul every Saturday to the best of my ability, whether it's on Martha's Vineyard or in Mount Kisco, New York. It's what I look forward to on Saturday. My family knows that I'm in shul on Saturday mornings.
Do your children go with you?
No, my son who's developmentally disabled did have a bar mitzvah.
Good for him.
I was instrumental in our religious school creating and maintaining a program for students of all abilities. So, I put my money where my mouth is.
Yes.
I put my efforts where my heart is. And my older son went to Hebrew school and the expectation is that he would go through high school, which he did. He was president of, USY. Those were the expectations. those were the expectations in my household. And so my son went through and happily listened to me and did that. And I know that it's in his heart and identity, but he sees Judaism from a slightly different lens. He sees it from a very intellectual standpoint, and he would more happily read the Tanakh from an anthropological and a literary point of view than actually believing in the literal.
But he has affection for it.
He has affection for it. He does. I have a more emotional tie. He has an affection that is has that, but really from kind of an evaluational eye.
Okay,
but that's what we did.
Okay, so come back here. I say to you, what's your reaction? How do you feel about the way in which a large portion of American Jewry really is very critical of Israel? And I interrupted you.
Okay, so they're critical of Israel in part because they don't have the psychological affinity that I was raised with. And so what makes you as an American Jew feel connected to Israel? Well, we don't live there, we're not fighting there, but guess what? I woke up this morning and I realized that I'm a Jew, and look, my fellow or my extended family in Israel, or maybe not my extended, there are Jews living in Israel. And so that's our connection. Religion, we're all Jews. But our American Jews are 85% non-Orthodox, and many of them don't have the background and working knowledge of that. But they see Israel now as less than a sympathetic family member. Israel for them has become Goliath. For me, it was David growing up all these years. Now I know it's Goliath, but our younger people are identifying as Jews, but they're seeing Israel as Goliath. But then the government-sanctioned chief rabbinate looks askance at the less observant American Jew.
Yes, and Bowie, the only reason I interrupt you is this is the panel session that you sort of hosted. You didn't wasn't about chairing it, but you introduced it and you led it.
Yes.
And it was about how does the Orthodox rabbinate in Israel embrace or not embrace non-Orthodox forms of Judaism, non-Orthodox Jews. And the vast, vast majority of Jewry is non-Orthodox. In America, 90% of American Jews are non-Orthodox.
Correct.
That doesn't mean they're not involved with synagogue life, but they're non-Orthodox.
Right.
And at the moment, this is portrayed as a problem that divides American Jewry from Israel. So since you've got here, I want you to speak to that for a moment. I don't know that you and I will agree on what this means or what should be done, but I want to hear what you have to say.
Well, I think that that's, the chasm between our two Jewish families is that the American Jew will tend to focus on more liberal issues. The Israeli brother or sister, although largely secular and not in favor of supporting the chief rabbinate either,
absolutely,
doesn't have the educational, formal education or experiential education of what an American Jew is. So I feel like we have these two halves, two bookends of the Jewish peoplehood who think they know each other but actually don't understand each other at all. We are functioning on parallel planes. We are not on the same wavelength. We will take American Jews, right or wrong, will tend to focus on the symbolism of the Western Wall. Israeli Jews, the secular Jews, of which are the majority of Jews in Israel, they don't even bother with the wall. They can't understand why American Jews are upset with the lack of the walk back on Robinson's Arch.
The compromise
Development.
that was worked
The
out.
compromise.
Ultimately, it fell apart. And for American Jewry, the sky fell.
It was a priority
Right.
for American Jews.
And
for
Israelis
Israeli Jews,
couldn't care less.
They could care less because they don't understand what the Chachmas is. They don't understand why we care so much about religion.
Are they wrong?
I don't want to say anybody is wrong.
They're not
We're
wrong.
uneducated.
They're not wrong.
We are uneducated about each other. And I think the way to chip away at the divisiveness is to spend time in each other's shoes. Israelis have priorities and they focus on security. Mm-hmm. They focus on the conflict. They're focused on whether, settlements should or should not be created or built.
And who's concentrating on that?
That's a good point. I would say that the coalition government is focused on, and now the nation-state bill is encouraging Jewish settlement. I think most of the liberal Jews are not in favor of expanding settlements.
The basic law is so complicated, I want to go in that direction. What I mean is, when you say that, we were talking about the difference between American Jewry and Israeli Jewry, and that they don't understand each other. And I'm asking you, which group do you think is focused more on the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and borders, American Jewry or Israeli Jewry?
Well, I would say that both. I'm not sure that there's more, because I think we American Jews are very critical of Israel not making enough progress in creating this two-state solution.
Okay, I think you're absolutely right. And this is my experience. You tell me if you've experienced it differently. My experience is this is the primary, when you talk to an American Jew about Israel, it's almost a euphemism for Israeli-Palestinian conflict. There is almost if you say, what's the issue about Israel? It's the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. When I talk to Israelis, that's not the issue. They care about the cost of living. For them, the Israeli-Palestinian conflict is just a fact of life, and most Israelis that I talk to, and you can tell me if you experience it differently, let me finish. Most Israelis I talk to say the following: I no longer believe there is somebody on the other side who's seriously ready to make peace with me. If nobody's willing to make peace with me, I'm not about to cede territory. But if you're asking me in some general philosophic sense, if there were a Palestinian leadership that honestly wanted to create a second state that would live without violence, we would coexist without violence. Forget peace. We shouldn't talk about peace. We should talk about non-violent coexistence. Most Israelis I talk to would say, if I believed there were an honest interlocutor on the other side who was willing to coexist with me in their own state without violence, not only would I give them the land, I'd help them develop the land. That is the overwhelming sentiment of Israeli Jewry. Of course we're for a two-state solution, but under one condition and one condition only, that there is somebody who's going to live with me without violence. And I don't believe, the Israeli doesn't believe that exists anymore. And Harriet, I don't believe it exists at this time. Do you?
I have to think that it will. And
I didn't say will. I said, does it exist now? Is there a leadership now in the Palestinian world ready to live with Israel in a nonviolent way?
Well, Abbas has overextended his term. He really does not manage the voice of all Palestinians, because you have, Abbas in the PA and the West Bank, and you have Hamas in Gaza. So does he have any authority to sit at a table and make peace and have Hamas go along with whatever he would come up with? No. Is there a successor to Abbas right now? Not that anybody knows. If you ask me today, tomorrow, in 3 months, but I don't want to focus on the short term. I need, for my peace of mind, to look at what could be and keep pushing to what could be. So maybe I'm a little starry-eyed.
You're idealistic, and you should be. But that's Jewish. To be Jewish is to dream. But it's
and if you will it, it is no dream.
Yes, but all idealism should be grounded in reality. That is a Jewish notion as well. There's the image of Jacob's ladder, which reaches into the heavens, but it's firmly implanted in the ground. The trick of life is to retain idealism without ever abandoning a realistic understanding of what's going on. So again, I'll say this. I have been for the two-state solution ever since I understood that in 1936, 7, and 8, the Yishuv said, we will share the land. Since then, that has been the formal position of the Jewish community. Yes, there are those who've opposed two states, but the formal position of Jewish community from 1938 till today is, if there's ever a way to have a two-state solution, we will share the land with Arabs, Palestinian or not. But the reality is, at the moment, you have people who are committed to Israel's destruction, not to working out. I don't know, and if I'm wrong, you tell me. I know of no Peace Now movement in the Palestinian world saying to Abbas, you've got to change your policy. Or in Gaza, Hamas, you've got to change your policy. I don't know of Arab authors and playwrights and cultural icons who are arguing that Abbas and Hamas are wrong. What we have in the Israeli model, Shalom Achshav, authors, playwrights, artists, thinkers, intellectuals, clamoring for a change in Israeli policy because they want to see movement. I don't see any of that in the Palestinian world. What I do see is Mahmoud Abbas heading a Palestinian Authority which has textbooks that vilify in the most heinous way Jews, so that you're taught math, you're taught how to add and subtract in Palestinian textbooks by how many Jews you can kill. Don't tell me that Mahmoud Abbas is ready to make peace with the state of Israel. Ultimately, the Palestinian leadership is held hostage to a Muslim ideology, an extremist Muslim ideology that says all this land is ours. And the problem with settlements is, to the Palestinian, Haifa is no less a settlement than is Kiryat Arba. And so I want a two-state solution, but I'm not going to pretend that the Palestinians are what they are not. And I don't understand, Harriet, for the life of me, I don't understand why every Jewish leader and every Jewish thinker doesn't say what I'm saying, which is, we're ready to make peace the first day there's somebody on the other side that makes. You want the West Bank, you can have the West Bank. Israel has said it time and time again. You want Gaza, here's Gaza. I don't see anything on the other side like what we have done. And forgive me, the AJC had a wonderful panel on what comes after Oslo. It was nonsense. And we've got Tal Becker and Dennis Ross and a member of the EU and a member of the UN. Not one of them talked honestly. And in part it's because, and then I'll let you respond, we are idealists.
And we've made this mistake. We think that if we're honest about the situation, it will sound as if we no longer want to make peace with the Palestinians, that it sounds like we're no longer in favor of a two-state solution. The two should not be conflated. One can be honest and one can say, at the moment, the Jew will make, the Israeli and the world Jew is ready to not only make peace, we will help them thrive. We are ready to pour money, technology, brain power into the Palestinians should live no less of a life as we. Shimon Peres said the Middle East should be a rival to the EU and the West. It should be a culture that uses both Israeli and the Palestinian genius to make something beautiful here. But until the Palestinian is ready to say one thing, Israel has a right to exist as a Jewish state. Until that is a fundamental feeling that pulsates throughout Palestinian leadership, everything else we say is nonsense. Okay, I'm done.
Look, you're right. The challenges seem almost impossible for there to be a two-state solution as long as, we have, for the next several years at least. I have to believe, you take somebody like Pak Yahya, who presented at the Global Forum, Indonesian. He's the head of the largest Muslim group in the world, 50 million Muslims. And he came here, perhaps at some peril from Indonesia, and Israel has no relations with Indonesia. And he stood up and spoke with Rabbi David Rosen, the chair of our International Interreligious Department. And he came out and said, there is no room for terrorism in Islam. It is too easy, and historically we have used religion as a tool to violence. We have to stop and use religion to solve conflict. Now, if he, representing 50 million Muslims, can get up there from Indonesia, there might be another person who has the authority or the ability to sway other followers. I have to believe, we met at Global Forum a woman Bedouin. Okay, so she's not a Muslim, but we met a Bedouin who decided girls had to be educated, and she is the principal of a school where she feels that she was helped in that society to create a model for other Bedouin girls going forward. There are people, we have Drew's neighbors, again, not, but who serve in the army. There are pockets of people of goodwill, and I have to hope and think that maybe it will take economic cooperation. Maybe we need to restart the Red Dead Water project with Jordan. There are ways to have people on the ground who can begin to trust each other. When you work together, you learn the person on the ground, and you begin to learn that you have so much more in common than you ever imagined. If we could initiate those economic collaborations from the bottom, if we could get people, maybe our Sunni friends, that Israel has become a little closer to. There may be ways from the outside to start putting a little pressure, and it may take years and years from now. But if you don't try, then nothing will change.
Absolutely right.
So yes, we don't have a partner today and we don't have a partner tomorrow, but we have to keep finding imaginative ways. Look at the hospital in the Galilee that takes in Syrians. Underground, I was there, with armed guards so that nobody would hurt the Syrians. There are ways to help that will teach people that they don't have to hate us anymore.
Bowie, I love the way you say it.
It didn't answer
You did answer. Yes, you did. You were very honest. And I love the way you say it, because what you're talking about is what you hope to create is a revolution. This will not work from the top down. It's got to work from the bottom up. And I applaud any effort. Please don't, no one should misunderstand me. I don't want to stop working towards what you're talking about. I'm just saying I don't want to fool myself into thinking that the people who are now in power in the Palestinian world are in their lifetime or in mine are going to make peace. It will take a Palestinian revolution, a revolutionary change in both Fatah and Hamas. It's not just Hamas. I just can't understand why people who know better make it sound like Fatah is really a threat. No. The Palestinian Authority, look at their textbooks, look at their television, look at their rhetoric, look at their actions. But I'm not in any way suggesting we shouldn't do everything you said, and I love the way you say it, and I want it to be true. I get chills even as you talk. I want it to be true. I just don't want to fool myself, and I don't want to blame Israel. And I'll say one more thing to you, and you can think about this. Israel is still the David. I want to remind you of the David and Goliath story. David was he wasn't a child. He was a young man. He was a strong, if you see the Michelangelo sculpture, that's David when he was that age. He was a strong human being able to protect himself with what he could do with a slingshot was extraordinary. But he was fighting a giant. That's Israel today. Israel is a David, strong, proud, and their slingshot is the IDF and all of the fabulous things they've done with their technology. But they're David. They are surrounded by millions of people who want to kill them. It is wrong for anyone, including for you and for me, to suggest that they are not the David. But you are correct. That's the view of American Jewry today. Israel is the Goliath, and they're persecuting the poor Palestinian people. It's a lie. And you and I have to stop facilitating that lie.
Well, to that extent, that's why I spend my days doing what I do.
I know. That's why I love you.
Because even with the chasm now, the growing chasm between American Jewry and Israelis, we have the vehicle that I've chosen, AJC, to go around the world and advocate on behalf of Israel, advocate not only in the United States, because my greatest fear is that Israel and the United States will sit on one plank of a seesaw, and the 191 other countries are going to sit at the other end, and we cannot bear that. We cannot have that happen. So I'm a believer in making as many friends for Israel as possible, so that she can be treated the same way in a normal world environment and have the respect and dignity that every other country has. And so to that extent, she is still David. I'm thinking in terms of a static Israel that has become economically strong. But in the rest of the world, she is still isolated and fights an uphill battle.
Absolutely.
And with resolutions always aimed only at her.
You say it beautifully. All right, I want to come back now to the issue that I brought you to, and then this long, long digression. Because, again, the session that you hosted at the AJC Global Forum 2018 in Jerusalem, And by the way, it was at a lovely spot.
Davidson's Plaza.
Yes. It was about what you just used the word chasm, that there's a chasm between American Jewry and Israeli Jewry. This is something I care enormously about. And by the way, you understand, you know JBS very, very well. What you're trying to do at AJC, in many ways, I'm trying to do that here. JBS is an attempt to educate and to correct misinformation. And there are people here, by the way, there are people who know very little, and they send me emails all the time how I've opened their eyes. JBS has opened their eyes. And I get emails all the time from people who are in our base who say, I can articulate it better now because I've heard a Harriet Schleifer, or I've heard all the people who speak. They watch the AJC Global Forum, and it's not like they have to be convinced, but we all need to be able to describe it and explain it better, especially when we're in conversations with people who are open to learning, but who don't see it the same way. Okay. But you used the word chasm. I've already indicated to you what I like to, I wish the discussion of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict were described differently. You said, and I think you were so right, American Jewry and Israeli Jewry, they live in different worlds. They don't know much about each other. One of the things I want to do one day is make sure that JBS is seen in Israel, because Israelis should see you and other American Jews talk about the issues that affect Israel, and they should also see what Jewish pluralism is like. On JBS, you see it. They don't see it. But I want to say this to you. I believe that the Israeli people have an integrity of their own. I believe they are very good people, and they create a society, a democratic, open society which embraces hostility in ways that America wouldn't for a moment tolerate. The idea that there is a party in the Israeli parliament dedicated to Israel's destruction, you wouldn't have that in the American Congress for a moment. The fact that Israel permits the Arabs to commemorate the Nakba, which is their way of saying the state of Israel is a catastrophe and should not exist. You think America would permit for one day a celebration of 9/11 by people who felt that 9/11 was somehow the just thing to do? Not in a million trillion years. The Israeli people are remarkable. They're good-hearted. They're idealistic. And they face the problems that we don't have a clue. And one of the things they say is, look, if American Jews who are Reform and conservative, Reconstructionist, if they don't like the form of Judaism in Israel, come here. Come here in numbers and change things on the ground. But you're sitting in New York and Seattle and Chicago and Atlanta and Baltimore and Boston, and you're telling me what Judaism should be. I don't care. It's not a big enough issue. And I don't want anybody to misunderstand me. I want there to be Jewish pluralism in Israel. I want there to be a third section at the Western Wall. And I've said it long before there was an issue at Robinson's Arch. There should be 3 sections. Men, women, egalitarian. That's what I want. But if the state of Israel does not implement it, Harriet, I'm not about to walk away from the state of Israel. I'm not about to deny them money. I'm not about to deny them political support. I'm not about to say, as people have said to me, Israel once had my unconditional love. I don't know if it'll have my unconditional love anymore because of the Western Wall. And when you get off the plane, is there anything that you can't do in Israel that you want to do? Is anybody stopping a non-Orthodox Jew from experience and living every facet of Israeli life? Yes, you can't stand with your wife at the Western Wall. Other than that, there are Reform synagogues in Israel. There are Masorti synagogues in Israel. Secular Judaism is the predominant, but a secular Jew in Israel is celebrating more Shabbat than the secular Jew even contemplates here in America. So and I'm saying to you, and you're sitting here gives me a chance to say it. What I'm saying is, I don't want American Jews turning their back on Israel because there's a chief rabbinate that is horrific at the moment.
I totally agree with you. I don't think we should ever turn our back on Israel. The same way if you disagree with a government policy in this country, do you move out of the United States and flee to Canada or Mexico? No. That's what a democracy is about. And that's what coalition politics is about. And so you live with policies that you don't agree with, and the hope is that the government will change, the legislation will change, and people who are in favor of one particular style of life will finally have the majority voice. And that's what you hope for. So, no, you never turn your back on Israel. And I think that the last thing to do is to disengage. I think the right way, the hopeful way, and the only way that I'm comfortable with is enhanced engagement. Mm-hmm. Spend more time together. Talk to each other. Experience. Come to my shul, I'll come to your shul. Live together a little bit. And then you might actually learn something and like it. But disengagement is the last thing I would ever want for any reason. I think even more than disdain that an American might express, even more dangerous is apathy. That's, the screw in the coffin, is when you're apathetic. And that's what hurts me the most. When I hear people say, I've never been to Israel, why would I want to go? I'd rather go to Paris. That hurts me, because that's turning your back on your peoplehood. And that's too important to me. And I know it's too important to you.
Absolutely. And again, I love the way you say it. Okay, so Mark and Harriet agree. Now tell me, what would you like to see happen in terms of the chief rabbinate and Orthodox and the Jewish pluralism in the state of Israel? Understanding that we're not walking away from Israel in the meantime.
Never.
We have a right to say we want it to get better. What's better? How can we make it better?
I think that the chief rabbinate should not have state sanction to be the controlling voice and judge on what passes for authentic Judaism. Why not have the chief rabbinate serve like the Archbishop of Canterbury, and be a figurehead, somebody that you turn to for guidance, but not have the supreme and last word about who can marry whom under what circumstances, and allow state recognition. State formal recognition in the marriage registry of people who want to get married by Masorti or conservative or reform or progressive or reconstructionist or non-denominational rabbis. So I think if the grip or the monopoly were loosened, I think that would really create in the American mind the need for a more liberal lifestyle, and they would feel closer and more affinity to Israel, and not feel like they're disrespected. I more so than who's right or wrong, I think there's a feeling of disrespect.
Are you Orthodox?
No, I am conservative.
Okay. You feel disrespected by Israel?
Personally, no. Okay. No, I personally don't.
I don't feel disrespected by Israel. I personally don't feel
disrespected, but I'm. If I have to look at my Jewish family, I want to do what's right for my Jewish family.
I do too, but you said something profound. You don't feel disrespected. By the way, I am not an Orthodox rabbi. I am not permitted in Israel to marry anybody. I don't feel disrespected by Israel. I feel disrespected by the Orthodox chief rabbinate, which is wrong. They've just got it wrong. But it's not Israel that disrespects me. And yet, that's what I experience when I talk to other. And it's not just, I'm worried about the non-Orthodox leadership now in America. I don't want leaders of non-Orthodox institutional life to say that that Israel disrespects them, because Israel does not.
Well, that's the same. I mean, but that's like saying you disagree with government policy, but you can still love the country.
Of course.
And that's the same thing, because the rabbinate has the strict monopoly governmental power to make those conversion decisions, personal status decisions.
You're absolutely right.
And to that extent, again, it's a disrespect for the bulk of world Jewry.
I'm not sure it's world Jewry.
Of world Jewry, because Americans and Israelis are basically 7.5 million each.
Okay.
So if you talk about numbers, and then you talk about secular Israelis, who are the majority of Israelis, then you're really talking about the majority of Jews who do not live an Orthodox lifestyle.
Absolutely right.
So you cannot lead the dog by the tail.
Then why has Israel permitted it? And I don't mean Israeli government. The Israeli people have allowed it. Why do you think that's true?
Well, because in the status quo letter with Ben-Gurion, when everybody was afraid that only 400 religious survivors were in Israel, and I want to say Israelis felt, or they were scared, that Judaism would vanish. Nobody would be able to carry it on. They didn't anticipate the wild success of the Israeli experiment.
Okay, I agree with you, but I'm asking you a slightly different question. Why haven't, as you point out correctly, and everybody should hear you, the majority of Israelis are secular, although their word secular is different than our word secular, but they don't attend synagogue regularly.
They don't, right.
Many of them do not observe kashrut. There is a form of Shabbat, interestingly enough, in many secular Israeli homes. But the majority of Israelis are secular. They're not Orthodox. But year after year after year, they don't make this an issue. Why?
Because they can still manage to get what they need outside of a religious marriage. They can live together. After 3 months, there's common law marriage. For most things, they can still live normal lives without the stamp of the rabbinate's approval. That's one thing. So
but you're exactly right. You're exactly right. For most Israelis, they don't rub up against this problem. And you and I know that for years there was a pattern. I mean, the irony, people should appreciate the irony. The irony is that the only place a Jew can't be married by the rabbi of his choice is in Israel. But many Israelis used to leave the country, get married, and come back.
Correct. Or they don't get married at all.
And then by the way, others...
They don't get married religiously.
And religiously, Jewishly. And then some, by the way, go to the equivalent of a city hall. An Orthodox rabbi marries them. Then they go and have their family together with a chuppah, and they have whoever they want marry them. And the state has already got it registered, and this wedding is a symbolic wedding.
But they won't register a couple that hasn't been married by somebody recognized by the chief rabbinate.
Absolutely right. That is the only way to get married. But my point is, the Israeli people,
they work around it.
Don't care.
They work around it. It's not a priority for them. The difference between the Israeli Jew and the American Jew is that religion is not a priority. The practice of religion is not a priority for Israelis. They get up in the morning, they put their rear ends on the line, they get shot at. Nobody has to remind them that they're Jewish. In this country, part of what we identify with if we say we're Jewish is that we practice Judaism.
Exactly right. You say it again perfectly. And my point is, and it comes back to your saying that we don't understand each other.
We don't.
If it doesn't matter enough, by the way, it's not that it doesn't matter at all.
No, it doesn't matter enough.
It doesn't matter enough to the Israeli,
Right.
who's living there 365 days a year. It seems to me that American Jewry has to be a little more humble about this and say, we will continue to lobby and do everything we can in a respectful manner, but we will not let this issue divide, create what you have correctly called a chasm. It is inappropriate for there to be any chasm between American Jewry and Israeli Jewry over this issue. And my concern is that I want American Jewish leadership to say that loud and clear. We want Jewish pluralism. We want to be respected in Israel by the religious authority. We want in Israel for there to be a third section at the wall which is symbolic. We want Reform, conservative, non-Orthodox rabbis, even Orthodox rabbis who are not accredited by the Orthodox rabbinate. We want them to be able to be Mesader Kiddushin at a wedding and that it counts. But in the meantime, it's not going to create a chasm. And Rick Jacobs and Julie Schoenfeld and Jerry Silverman have to be saying this. Harriet Schleifer has to be. David Harris has to be saying this. Every Jewish leader has to understand the nuance that you so perfectly define. And the nuance drives us, it seems to me, to say, I say it as, I'm not a Jewish leader, but I have a platform because of JBS. I bring you on because I want people to hear you. We have to be saying, and you have to use your influence, and you have enormous influence. You have to use your influence on David Harris, on Rick Jacobs, on Julie Schoenfeld, on Jerry Silverman. They should never, ever suggest a chasm is the appropriate way for American Jews to feel.
Well, I think I can say with confidence that neither David Harris nor Julie Schoenfeld nor Harriet Schleifer would ever, ever turn our backs, walk away.
Absolutely.
Because remember, AJC convened something called the Jewish Religious Equality Coalition. It's 4 years old.
You chaired it for a while.
I'm co-chairing the development piece. I'm on the steering committee.
Right.
It is actually run by David Ellenson and by Dov Zakheim. Dov is an Orthodox Jew, and David Ellenson is the most wonderful reform leader.
He's amazing.
He is amazing. And they chair.
These are tremendously committed people.
They are. And the coalition has 14 institutional members ranging from very progressive through Reconstructionists, through open Orthodox, Jewish, organization of feminists are part of that. We span the range of observance, practice, and thinking on Judaism. Our coalition is one that totally believes in engagement and never,
Absolutely.
never walking away. You don't throw your you don't leave your marbles and throw away when the game isn't going right.
Exactly right. I'm only saying by the way, I love Julie Schoenfeld. I think Rick Jacobs is out of this world. And Jerry Silverman is one of my favorite people in the world, as is David Harris, who's been extraordinarily good to me. I'm in no way suggesting that any of them are not totally committed to the state of Israel. I don't know, however, and I say this gently, they really have to speak out against there being a chasm. And you said it, you didn't say there could be a chasm. You said there is a chasm.
There's a growing chasm.
Yes. And I'm sorry, I don't hear, and David Harris is outside this. I don't hear religious figures, and I adore David Ellenson, who's also been very good to me. I just don't hear enough coming out of non-Orthodox Jewish leadership saying what you and I have said at this table. You have every right to work to see Israel become a pluralistic haven for Jewish life.
Well, we did go to the Knesset, And we did testify in the
Good
Knesset
for
during
you.
Global
Good
Forum.
for you.
So we did. So with the sanction of, the Jewish.
But you're not walking away.
Right.
And not only you're not walking away, you don't feel a chasm between you and Israel.
I'm too close.
There's no reason for a
I
chasm.
know. I mean,
Harriet.
I'm too close to Israel. Not in a blind way. My heart is there.
I want everybody to feel what you feel.
So do I.
Okay, so we end this way. You're looking at Jewish life, both in America and around the world. What do you fear, and what gives you hope?
Well, I fear, again, the lack of education among younger and younger Jewish people. There's so much that I don't know that I've just learned as an adult because I go to shul, and I'm reading the Tanakh, and I'm heartbroken at the thought that our descendants won't know how to walk into a shul, won't feel even comfortable in a shul. And I call it shul, I don't even call it temple. I mean, like, I'm so afraid that there will be apathy toward your Jewish identity. So that's my fear in this country. What gives me hope is that we're smart enough and we have the resources to work against that possibility. We can still go around and speak to people, and you can get on the air and I can get on the air,
Yes.
and I can travel around the world, and that I have the desire and the resources to do it. So we're not victims in a shtetl, afraid to talk, to the authorities. We're worldly. And I think that we have to use whatever we have to fight against a lack of education and a chance of apathy. So it's a double sword.
Okay, beautifully said. Isn't this an exciting time in Jewish life?
I think it's always exciting in Jewish life.
Oh, I just feel that we are.
I
maybe-
lament the Yiddish theater that I don't go to it more. I mean, like, I think I think every time
Yes.
had a special place in Jewish history. Every time was unique. I mean, if I think about my parents growing up in Europe, I think of people, selling bagels, and I think how beautiful, I mean, like, quaint and beautiful Jewish life. So it was limited. But every place and time had a flavor unique to itself.
You're fabulous.
No, I'm not
Yeah,
fabulous,
you
but thank
are.
you.
You are.
Thank you.
And when I talked about, Jewish lay leadership, one of the things that gives all of us hope, you're not alone, but it is the people like you who are making Jewish life possible. And, the David Harrises of this world are extraordinary, but they wouldn't be able to do it without you. And so I'm saying to you, for all the people who are watching, kol hakavod to you, kol tuv v'hatzlacha. I can't tell you how much I'm impressed by you and love you. And you'll have to be here time and time again. Fair enough?
Fair enough.
Thank you. Doc. Thank you.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Harriet Schleifer, chair of the Board of Governors of the American Jewish Committee, a woman who is making an amazing contribution to the quality of Jewish life today. I hope you enjoyed meeting her. As always, I invite you to be in touch with me with any thoughts or comments you may have to any of the ideas expressed on this edition of L'Chaim. Please email me, write me, post on our Facebook wall, or tweet me. I look forward to hearing from many of you. Until the next time, I'm Mark Golub. L'Chaim, my friends, to life.
L'chaim is a presentation of Jewish education in media.